Good evening. Tonight on AYMAN, DOGE is ramping up its purge, targeting more than just DEI staffers. Can it be stopped? I'll talk to Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland. Plus, hear from a group of dreamers who chose to self-deport during Trump's first term and are now helping others do the same. And if you want proof that religious groups have a growing influence on Trump, then check out his new faith office in the West Wing. I'm Paola Ramos, in for AYMAN Mohadin. Let's do this. Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency isn't making things up as they go, like many of us thought. Before Trump even took office, Musk positioned his department as the enforcer of Trump's executive order against diversity. Now, we already know the racist, the destructive impact of that order. But now, DOGE is using it for something even bigger, a government purge. Documents obtained by the Washington Post show this was the plan all along, and it's expecting to move faster than we ever thought. Phase one was obvious, right? Undo Biden's DEI initiatives and push Trump's executive order. But we're now in phase two, set to end on Wednesday. Based on these documents, this stage is about identifying, quote, corrupted branches, even loosely tied to DEI, and putting employees on leave. Phase three calls for mass firings beyond DEI-linked positions. Now, the goal is crystal clear. Wipe out anyone tied to DEI and gut agencies they see as weak, all while pretending it's about cutting costs. Now, that's the message. What sticks out, though, is the departments and the agencies that DOGE plan to target, right? There's agriculture, veteran affairs, commerce, justice, energy, the Health and Human Services Department, and so on. You get the point. This was in the works long before Musk and DOGE employees got unlawful access to Treasury payments. They can't pretend they went after these departments because of wasteful spending when the plan was set this far in advance. But look at what's missing, the real money pits, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, even ICE. Sure, some of the agencies that they're trying to target do have reckless spending, so we can agree on that. But that's not the point. The point is that Trump and Musk are going after the most vulnerable, not to save money, but to make it look like they are. Now, before we go into how Americans are actually impacted by this, take a listen to what Project 2025 co-founder Russell Vose said about Trump's goal a while back ago.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of the rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. We want to put them in trauma.
A federal employee responded to those remarks yesterday on MSNBC.
I think it's disgusting and sad. As they attack federal employees, they're attacking the ability of the federal government to protect you out there when it comes to protecting you from companies dumping toxic chemicals in your water and your air, when it comes to veterans being able to get the health care that they need, when it comes to banks who take money out of people's bank accounts for not having enough money. It's the federal government that comes in and protects you. And that's exactly why they're tearing it down, because they want the ability to move freely, to have no one stopping them from making as much profit as they can. And we are here sticking it out to make sure that we continue to protect the American people.
The American people, no? Despite all the times that Trump administration says America first, it's the American people that will feel the pain. So let's talk about that pain. We're in the middle of tax season, and who does Trump decide to lay off? Thousands of IRS workers, which would slow down your refunds. For many Americans, think about it, no? It's the largest paycheck of the year. Trump talks about keeping as many Americans employed, but he and Musk will likely force thousands into unemployment. Now, a former Navy reservist who lost her job at the Department of Education told USA Today, quote, "I'm much more angry than devastated. It took away my hope that I would continue to be respected and valued for my service, and especially in the way the termination happened." And now Musk is messing up in an area that a lot of politicians care about. The National Nuclear Security Agency is within the Department of Energy, one of those places on DOGE's target list that I mentioned earlier. Now, hundreds were fired a few days ago. Now, The Trump administration is scrambling to rehire a lot of those folks. Why? Well, because concerns grew about how the dismissal of these people would jeopardize the national security of our country, especially since many were tasked with designing, building, and overseeing the United States nuclear weapons stockpile. Now, it's dangerous things that we're talking about. It's not just this nuclear agency. The CIA sent buyout offers to staff around the world last week, which directly contradicts something this administration wants: more spycraft and covert action. Now, obviously, that goal in and of itself is problematic, but these buyouts and firings don't even make sense now. So now that we know why this is happening and where cuts will happen next, how can it be stopped? How can it be stopped before it's too late for thousands of Americans? So let's ask Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland of Washington. She represents the state's 10th congressional district. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show today.
Of course. So 14 states recently filed a lawsuit, Congresswoman, arguing that Elon Musk's authority at DOGE is unconstitutional. And these states want a court order to specifically block Musk from making changes to government funding, canceling contracts, making personnel decisions, and more. But then there's this other fact, right, that you have Judge Tanya Chutkan said that this request was too broad. So I guess my first question to you is, what is your response to all of this? Now, and do you think that the courts are a way to rein in DOGE?
So my response to all of this, as you mentioned at the top of your show, is that this is Project 2025 in real life. However, what the Musk Incorporated and Trump administration are trying to do is just flood the lane, do so many things that are so egregious with such a rapid pace that people are confused, their heads are spinning, and they don't know what to do. And I want to point out a few things that really stood out to me. If you think about the agencies that they are attacking, right? Mm-hmm. Department of Energy, because they want to undo all the climate change things we did. They're coming after the Veterans Administration, firing people. They're talking about eliminating the Department of Education. And one of the things that's interesting here is that they've basically weaponized federal government workers, the very people who are working hard to keep us safe, to uphold rules, to do their best to protect us. And the interesting thing about these agencies is that this is a path to the middle class for a lot of communities of color, especially African Americans. I remember growing up hearing people say, get yourself a good government job. And I believe that we obviously always have to look for places where there's waste, but to arbitrarily just gut these agencies, it's hurting the American people, it's not making us safer, and basically the Trump administration is lying every single day because they promise to lower prices and do things to help Americans. This does the exact opposite.
So let's talk about that, Congresswoman, what this actually means for instance, for your constituents, right? We know, for example, that DOGE is threatening the education department, threatening to restrict states' funding if they don't comply and cut DEI programs. So talk to me about how a threat like this impacts your district.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the public school system in most states, especially in Washington state, you know, a lot of the kids who are in public schools are children of color and minorities. So there is dependence on Title I funding to help fill a gap of communities that are underserved where they don't have the same tax revenue. The work that comes in and the money that comes in to help students who are disabled. A lot of important funding comes from the Department of Education. If you do away with the DOE, you're stripping that funding away from districts. So it means that school districts are going to struggle. They may have to ask their voters to raise taxes. And this is the opposite of what is supposed to happen. I come back to the fact that in the United States, for so many families, education is the equalizer. Education is a path to the middle class. And in many cases, it helps people stay in the middle class. If you hurt the Department of Education, you are taking away people's livelihoods.
I want to talk about another agency because you sit on the House Armed Services Committee, and we know that Trump has mentioned that he wants DOGE to investigate the Pentagon in theory, which is, of course, one of the most wasteful departments and probably one of the first that DOGE should have looked into, if those intentions were, in fact, genuine. But Musk has been very quiet when it comes to attacking this specific department. What do you make of that?
So the first thing that I would do if DOGE is sincere about looking at the Department of Defense, let's look at the government contracts. And the first thing I would ask is, what government contracts does Mr. Musk have? What is Musk Incorporated doing with the Department of Defense? How is he benefiting from that? But obviously, with With a giant agency that size, there is always room to do better. We should look at everything from top to bottom. But I think the first question I would ask as someone who is a U.S. citizen or someone who lives in this country, we're looking at DOD, it's like, is Musk benefiting from the Department of Defense contracts? I would start there.
There's this question, right? Like there's a lot that can potentially be done to stop someone like Elon Musk. But say in the scenario that he's successfully put to a side, the fact is that he still has the president's ear. No, he still has immense influence over the most powerful person in this country. And so
right.
What would be the scenario there? I mean, how much can be done on a practical level right now?
So if you look at what they're doing right now, they are having no regard for the co-equal branch of government, which is Congress. And Trump knows that he is so poor at his job and so incompetent that there's no way he could work with House Republicans to get these things done. So he's bypassing the system. It's illegal, it's unconstitutional, and he's given the keys to the White House to Elon Musk, someone who basically has no idea how these agencies work. And you see them having to walk things back because they're hearing from farmers. They're hearing from folks who are very, very concerned about nuclear safety. So many things that they've done make no damn sense. And so as you look at what they're trying to do, what we can do to stop them, number one, let the public know in plain language exactly what they are doing. Number two, use the tools we have from a legislative standpoint. We introduced the Taxpayer Data Protection Act to make sure that they could not get to this information. And then number three, let's litigate, right? There are probably 40 lawsuits in play right now. And every time it goes to court, we tend to prevail. So even people, even our judges understand that this is unconstitutional and makes no sense.
I'm curious, Congresswoman, what you're hearing, if anything, around the Department of Treasury and tax refunds. I think that's something that a lot of your constituents and people across the country care about. Have you heard anything in that regard?
Well, what I'm hearing from people in the district is that people are scared because it's just coming at them with such speed. And you know this, you talked about this earlier. People look forward to that tax refund. It means a lot to a lot of different families. If we're cutting staff at the IRS, that means your payment and your refund will not get processed in a timely manner. So all these things that they're doing allegedly in the name of government efficiency is actually hurting people. And here's the thing, too. I want to emphasize this. Musk Incorporated and Donald Trump do not care if you get sick. Right. They do not care if you get access to health care. They do not care about your livelihood. They don't care about your retirement. They do not give a shit about the American people. That is the absolute truth.
Those are strong words, and I think people are feeling that. And I'm wondering also what advice you're giving to some of your constituents, right? I'm thinking about, for instance, like public school teachers that care about DI, that care about teaching Black history, that may feel at the same time scared, of what's coming to them, of what they see from Washington, D.C. What advice do you give a public school teacher in your district?
So, the advice that I would give to our educators, first of all, I would thank them profusely for the work that they are doing. And I think it's really important for them to not be afraid to teach history. You know this, Black history is American history. All the different groups of people who are part of this country, that is part of American history. So I think my question would be, so if a teacher decides that they're going to teach Black history during the month of February, because we're celebrating Black History Month right now, there's nothing wrong with that. So the Trump administration and Mr. Musk, there's a lot of saber rattling. They talk a big game. But if they're going to go from school district to find teachers who are teaching American history, that's a complete waste of time. And that would be something worth the DOGE investigating.
Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.